What's up, wild ones? Ariana here, and I am back at it again after a very, very long time. And I apologize for that. I fell victim to burnout, and we're going to talk about that today in this very highly requested video that I've gotten quite a few requests actually to make an update of what it's been like working as an ER veterinary technician. If you're interested what my first year of being an ER vet tech looked like, then just keep watching. Now, before we get into the video, I do just want to shout out my website. I am selling pet portraits, so if that's something that you're interested in, visit SaveTheWildOnes.org. The link is going to be down in the description. And if not, we're going to get right into it. First things first, I think, is the most important thing to talk about is shifts. And more specifically, the first, second, and third shift when you're looking at working at a ER veterinary clinic, whether it be specialty or just a plain ER. Now, I only worked first shift, so I can only really talk the most about that shift, but I think enough about the third shift to kind of get an idea as far as all the different things. First shift is typically between 7A to 7P, or anywhere in between then, and then 11 to 11, noon to midnight, or 7P to 7A. Those are kind of how those shifts kind of look. Really, the biggest differences on how the shifts go are craziness. If you work an AM shift, or a mid shift even, you're gonna start off slow. And then towards 10 a.m. noontime is when shit hits the fan. If you're a PM person, you come into your shift and shit's hitting the fan, and then you leave on a more calm note. I even know some people who have been able to do schoolwork overnight, and it really just depends on where you work too. So, I mean, if you're in vet tech school, chances are an ER will hire you. That would be a real nice setup if you do overnight. It would make going to school more difficult though. Really, the difference in the shifts is chaos is going to happen at different times of your shift. And two, I think the biggest difference is the overnight staff technically has to take on a role of a receptionist in most cases at some point in the night. So not only are you dealing with, your inpatients and the outpatients and all of the things going on, you're still having to deal with said reception duties as well. What is the position like? Now, this is really going to look different if you work in just a plain ER or if you work in an ER and specialty. As you can see, I worked at Blue Pearl. I also, I'll fast forward a little bit, ended up working at a different ER within this time as well. And they're kind of the same, but they're both emergency and specialties. With an ER, you're only gonna have your ER patients. You're gonna have triage, outpatient, inpatient, plus or minus an ICU. If you're triaging, that's when you're getting the histories of the patient. That's when you're talking to the clients and getting all of this information and relaying it to the doctor. Outpatient technician is then taking the treatments and all of the things that the doctor orders and completing those things. And then sometimes you have a discharge tech, other times the person who's on outpatient that is not only triaging but is also discharging as well. I got something in my eye. I'm okay. Outpatient is triaging, treatments, and sending out the door. Whereas if you're an inpatient technician, your sole responsibility is taking care of the patients that didn't leave. If you work in just an ER, you're just dealing with those cases. But if you're dealing with an ER specialty, not only are the patients that you're dealing with coming from the ER, but they're surgical patients. They're patients that are staying for the day that need to get an ultrasound or some kind of test done or a diabetes curve or anything to that effect. So you're having to be the one to manage everybody else's stuff in an ER and specialty. So that is something that would be worth asking your boss about as far as the duties and whose patients you're taking care of, that kind of thing. But the second practice that I worked at, your specific places where you stay unless something happens and you got to switch things around. So if you're on inpatient, you're solely on inpatient. They split it up between cats and small dogs and big dogs. So it all just kind of depends. They also have their second ICU. Now, what if you've never worked in an ER before? Let me tell you, they'll take you. ERs are struggling, at least in my area that I'm aware of. It's something that I think it's a really good experience out the door of school, because most places are used to the turnover, so they're used to having people who are not experienced. Especially with the shortage of vet techs, I think you have a pretty good chance of getting the job, unless you have poor references. If you get hired and you're completely overwhelmed like I was, you need to go to your bosses and tell them that, because keeping an open communication lets them know, okay, yeah, she may be struggling, but she's still making an effort. She is still making an effort to learn the job, and it's just taking them a little bit longer. Whereas if you're the type of person that's not going to talk to your boss, and everyone around you is like, okay, she doesn't want to learn, she's not asking questions, she's not getting it, and you look bad. So it's important to talk to your boss. I even went up to my bosses and said, do you know of any CE that's available that would help me in A, B, and C places? And they like shoved CE down my throat. There was more CE than I even looked at. I didn't. But I'm lying, I did. But that's besides the point. All I'm saying is seek help. And also seek help before you learn bad habits. And be prepared to let go of the habits that you already have. Because each practice you go to, no matter if it's an emergency or specialty or a general practice, they're going to have their own things and the way that they do things and the way that they wrap catheters. And do not get stuck on only doing it one way. There's also a million other ways of doing things. It will probably take you more than 6 months to get adjusted to being a ER technician. So don't get discouraged when you're not picking things up, because it's important to know, if you've never worked in an ER before, you're not going to know everything. There are going to probably be multiple doctors, and it's going to be overwhelming, and it's going to take a minute. So be easy on yourself, because I wasn't, and it made it way worse than I needed to make it. It's important to know, if you've never worked in an ER before, if you make a mistake, you need to say something. Own up to it, because that's going to make you look better than if you played stupid and pretended like you didn't know. And it's also extremely dangerous, and patient safety goes out the window if you don't say something. Although you may want to be like, oh, okay, my patient's fine, nobody knows this, that, and the other. Say something, because the second you own up to your mistake is the second that you've earned trust from someone else and the doctor you're working with. I can't tell you how important it is and how much people look at that and have talked about that in other personal settings. Let them know when you make a mistake. And that really just goes for anywhere you work in veterinary medicine. That's the number one way to get someone to trust you, is to admit when you make a mistake. Because most of the time, things can be fixed, but only if you say something. How to deal with the inevitable, mean clients. I want to go into a way more in-depth way of dealing with these kinds of clients, so stay tuned for a video like that. And if you'd like it, like this video, irate, nasty, mean clients are something you are going to deal with working in an ER, and there's no avoiding it. First, and if I can leave you with only one thing, it is to understand that irate, nasty, mean, sad clients who then take things out on you, it has nothing to do with you. Do not respond emotionally to it like it has something to do with you, because you are not the company. You are not your owner of your company. You are just the talking poster that is relaying information to these clients. If they are angry or irritated or ornery, it is not your fault. You didn't make these rules, so you really have no reason to be upset or mad. So it's something to think about too. Anytime I have someone who's mad at me for prices or this or that, chances are they've never had to bring a vet to the ER before. So this is scary. They haven't been planning for it. Everybody has money issues, and that's one thing vet techs can relate to, is if we didn't work where we worked, we wouldn't have that money either. It's just important to remind yourself of this, because when you take yourself out of it and remind yourself like you're not actually the one that they're mad at or the one that they're being nasty to, you're just a body in front of them, it makes it a little bit easier to deal with it. I usually just go, okay, well, I really understand how frustrating this must be. Let me get my manager, because unfortunately I can't do anything. and then they're usually like, okay, huffing and puffing like my dog does. A lot of times anger and nastiness is really just a mask for fear. Also, something that I think is important to know if you are planning to work in a veterinary ER setting is it is going to be a stressful environment. Things are dying, and 9 times out of 10, the environment's just stressful and serious to begin with. It is going to be stressful around your coworkers because, you know, you're new, you have to learn, but life is still happening in the ER. So people who are very serious and trying to make sure everything's going great and everything's staying alive are also having to babysit you. So don't take the frankness and the sternness and maybe the lack of trying to get to know you real well, because chances are they've been drowning and, you know, they need your help, but they also have to take steps, and that can be frustrating and hard to deal with. Is it right that some people are not so nice? No, but in the same respect, it's also a very different environment. So don't expect the happy hunky-dory that you would get from a general practice. If you're only working in an ER and with a small amount of people that work in the ER, it's probably going to be very cliquey, and chances are you may be able to, you know, weasel your way into the clique and all will be fine, well and good, but there's a chance that you might not. I will say I've worked at both a smaller practice ER specialty and a bigger practice ER specialty, and both of them had cliques. It's like any other veterinary practice, it's gonna be the same. The big difference is gonna be how many people work there. Whereas when I worked in a bigger specialty, there were more people around and you're exposed to more people, and I think it mixes up the pot a little bit more than when you just have like 4 people stirring the pot and everybody can talk at once, if that made any kind of sense. I 100% recommend going for a working interview because you will be able to tell the lay of the land, get a feel for the vibe, see the kinds of people you'd be working with, and I would stay longer than the 2 hours they usually ask you to. Stay for the day. Work with them if they'll let you, like, get your hands dirty, see if it's something that you'll like. Yeah, it sucks to work for free, but in the same respect, that is going to be the easiest way for you to decide whether or not it's going to be something you're going to want to do. Also, this is kind of like a side piece. It's not totally important, and I think it's something you have to worry about not only with ER and specialty, but also with general practice. Stop stress eating. Stop stress eating. But yeah, everybody's got that problem, not just you, sweetheart. My very last tip, trick, whatever you want to call it, give it a year. 1 full year. Give it a year in the ER. That is the best kind of experience that you can have on a resume, and a year shows commitment. It's worth it to stick it out for the full year. Granted, I know some people can't do that. I actually switched to a different ER 8 months in, which is also why I had a hard time making this video, because I was leaving and ended up getting a job in internal medicine. Felt bad for taking a 1 year in the ER and then not being in it for a year in the ER, but I did. The first few months of my new job was spent in their ER for the remainder of what I needed for a year. And I think working in the ER in this new place also helped me for when I switched to internal medicine. But I'm gonna do a whole video on my internal medicine job now after all of this. But I am still picking up shifts in the ER. So if there are things that you'd like to know, tips and tricks, I'll leave you with one awesome final tip, and it's my favorite tip out of all of them. If you value your lunch breaks, get a Ford Transit Connect camper van, or a van, and convert it in the back, and really you can just put the seats down and put a mattress topper on top, or even just a bunch of blankets. Can I just tell you, girlfriend, it's the best lunch break you will ever take in your entire life. Especially if you were like when I worked in general practice and I got an hour to sit down on your lunch break, which this is the ER, let's be honest. But I get a half an hour break that I'm allowed to take. I have internet on my phone that I can put on my iPad to watch a Netflix show on my lunch break while I snuggle in blankies and pillows. If nothing else helps with your mental issues while at work, that helps. Just saying. and then you can get out of the building. But anyway, that's going to be my last tip for the day. I hope these tips helped you out. Like I said, if you're interested in finding out more about me or just seeing the different kind of stuff that I offer, check out my website. And once again, guys, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you, every single one of you. We're at 212. It's exciting. Stay happy, stay healthy, stay wild. Bye, guys.